This is not a recruitment podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Powered by People podcast. Joined by William J. Brewer, Talent Strategy Director of the Rec Hub.
Official name.
Yeah, that's his official name. And I'm going to give this a go. Maria, I'm going to skip the Maria Munoz.
Linage.
Maria Linage Munoz.
No practice.
So we're gonna let Maria introduce herself because I'm clearly not equipped for the Spanish accent.
We'll get there. Thanks, Harry.
Yeah.
So hi, Bill. Hi, Harry. My name is Maria Linage Munoz, and
There you go.
Director of People and Talent at Alteos in Berlin.
Fantastic. And today we're going to talk about a range of challenges that we have all experienced around this table. Through the challenge that comes with scaling, onboarding, and getting people up to speed. Something that has been a pretty prominent topic for lots of conversations that we've all had on this podcast. So we're going to dive into that a little bit. Bill, why don't you kick us off with some of the challenges that you think we've experienced in particularly the onboarding?
This topic, I mean, this year's obviously not been a year for many companies to be scaling. More companies go the opposite direction, but I think we're
Perfect time to talk about it.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see the market change and people are starting to get back to hiring, and people even more so now are really focusing on the right key hires, and they don't want to be making mistakes in their hiring as they start to hire again. So this topic of onboarding, how to onboard, the right skills in the interview process for soft skills. You and I both know we made a lot of mistakes in this in the Rec Hub.
Did we?
Scaling, sometimes wrong hires, people we thought were going to be maybe right skills, wrong soft skills for the type of business we were trying to grow and create. I think as you grow fast, you kind of miss that sometimes and you downplay how important it is. And it's not like a 50-50 soft skills versus hard skills. I think there's more of a weighting to it on the soft skill side as you scale that kind of gets downplayed. So, yeah.
I think also infrastructure. I think we miss, hiring the right people or wrong people is one challenge when one of the obvious challenges when scaling, but having the infrastructure to manage a bigger workforce. We weren't quite as haven't grown quite as large as Alteos, but going from sort of 10 to 50 in a pretty quick period of time, there's some of those earlier challenges for even like having a HRIS. We didn't really have anything like that. What about you, Maria?
Yeah, same thing. Talking about skills, the one thing we discovered that was very interesting is that the soft skills needed or the type of employee needed in a startup is different to the one you need in a scale-up. And we had all of these amazing, beautiful people who loved wearing many hats, doing many things, just grabbing a project and running with it, whether it was in their area of expertise or whether they just wanted to learn or were excited about it. And then suddenly you bring on all of these other people who come with promises and with skills and with experience, with expertise, with quality, and they sort of take away some of those projects. And those who love wearing many hats now have to wear just a few of them. And I guess that we underestimated preparing them for that. First of all, realizing that it's different people. Some people love to go in depth and be really good at what they do and show their best self. And other people just adore doing so many different things. And that is something I personally had to learn.
It's really interesting, actually. I didn't think about that one because we had similar challenges, particularly when you're 5, 10 people, everyone's very, very close. And then, not that we scaled to hundreds of thousands of people, but simply going to 50 or 60, particularly the leadership's time was taken away in different areas, and meant that some of those people that were maybe in the earlier tranches of hiring didn't get to see or spend time with the leadership team as much as they were used to. And that in itself created some challenges, right?
Yeah, and looking back now, we never had that preparation for transition with people in the team. Like we never geared them ready for what the changes were going to look like or how their role's going to change in the business. We kind of just moved on and the business grew. But then when you look back, you're like, well, yeah, you can understand why that person or they didn't feel like they were part of it as it grew, because you didn't prepare them.
And you don't want to lose that, right? You don't want to lose people who just want to see work and grab it and do it.
Yeah.
It's such an awesome culture to have, to somebody say, well, I work in finance, but I see this diversity and inclusion problem and I want to be part of that and I want to help. And so you love that mentality, but at the same time, you have to start specializing people so that you can start documenting stuff and you can start setting up quality standards. So keeping that culture, keeping the flexibility, keeping the get work done mentality, and at the same time giving people clear roles and clear tasks and start bringing processes in, I find a really important balance to strike.
For sure. If you can just remind us, like, sort of when you joined Alteos, where were you at, and sort of where have you scaled to?
Yeah, I joined a year ago in August 22, and we were about 50 employees, and we are now just over 100. So
right, doubled in size. Yeah.
And you were saying that these aren't maybe the most typical times to scale, which is true, but it doesn't take anything away from any old startup that is successful, that gets funded, and that has made plans and promises to their investors, and has to,
figure it out
and make true on those promises. And then AI comes around the corner and says, "Oh, there goes your technology strategy." So, okay, we thought we were building this digital journey. Well, now it looks different. So you get all of these different challenges. The economy is difficult. I mean, the war is very near to Germany, still is, and is still a big problem. And then the technology basically, AI basically questioned everything. What was our technological vision and what we should offer and what made us competitive. So yeah, it's many things too.
I think this is the time really when, businesses have an opportunity to just take a minute, breathe, understand how to, if they're going to be scaling over the next 6 to 12 months or even further, what does their business need to look like? How do we position those organizations in order to start scaling? Because when you're in it and you're scaling and if you haven't thought about those challenges, well, then you're potentially going to be experiencing loads of attrition and you're not getting the most out of people, right? So although not many businesses are in hyper scale, it's a really good moment to take a breath before you have to go back to that, right?
Yeah.
What's our if we had somebody in the room now that was 50 people and they were going on a journey to hire 100, what would we recommend as our top tips? What would we suggest that they should start looking at right now?
Silence. I mean, I was going to jump on the last point, and this point is still relevant to it, is it's not necessarily like slow and steady wins the race, but plan, like do a SWOT analysis on what your business is going to look at 50 and what challenges you're going to face. If our business was 50 tomorrow, what challenges will we face by being 50? And if we got there, start to picture yourselves in that position before actually growing. Because I think it's obviously scaled up over the last years. They just said, let's hire and then worry about those problems when we get there. Whereas I think now, and it's different for every single business, which is why you can't really give a blanket answer, but the more planning you can do and visualizing, right, if we get to 100, what structures do we have in place for that? What do we need to change? Who do we need to prepare? Who can step up into different roles? And what about these people that were early on? What can they do in the business? What can they bring? Really simulate what it's going to look like as you grow, as opposed to what roles do we need in the business to get there, if that makes sense.
I kind of like the idea, just thinking about it, of doing mapping out an employee experience. You know, like you do a customer experience journey map. You could do that. You do the same for your employees. So, you know, from recruitment all the way through to exit. And do we have the right processes in place for each of those touch points with the organisation? Whether that's a monthly one-to-one or a 6-month self-assessment, how are those being conducted? How are they being? I know we've talked a lot about documentation in the past, like how are we documenting those things? And that can then almost inform the technology that's needed, whether that, you know, when you're looking at your HRIS or your ATS recruitment platform or your engagement software.
Absolutely. And that's one of the first things we implemented a year ago when we decided it was time to scale. And we realized very quickly that the way we were hiring at the time was very intuitive. And based on, you know, whoever was actually doing the interview and whoever knew something about the topic.
I think a lot of startups do that, don't they?
Yeah, and there was no journey, there was no skills journey. And then we said, okay, well, you know, we're losing some of these people early on, maybe because we're not making good on our promise when they start, or the other way around, and which means that there was no alignment, and the alignment starts with ourselves. So what are some of those skills we're looking for, and what are some of the must-have skills and the nice-to-have skills, and then make sure that they pull through from the job description to the interview questions, to the hiring decision, to the compensation, to the potential career development, the next step. So, you know, the journey you were talking about, because one thing is to actually find the right people, and it's not an easy task to get people to lead good quality interviews. That is very difficult. But then to actually make good on the promise and make sure you retain the people and you can actually develop them.
Like you say, it's an expensive process to bring them in. So if we don't make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep them, then it just becomes even more expensive to go hire somebody else, right?
And if there's another thing I think we underestimated is how immensely comfortable with ambiguity they have to be. Because it's not just that you change from a startup to a scale up. It is also that the strategy changes, and you're trying to grow as an organization. So you're trying to bring in business. So you're trying to, you know, put products out there, and you're trying to go for new industries and new markets, and it's trial and error, and you know, it's a very agile process, and people have to be comfortable putting all of their effort into developing something, going to market, and then maybe having to sundown it before, you know, it's even successful. And that has to be okay. And it has to be quick.
Fast, as they say.
Yeah, exactly. And then have the skill, another thing that we try to do, we're setting that up right now, is try not to just have the skills that people have in the current role or they were hired for, but actually have a full picture of that skill. Because then once you change in your product verticals and you look at other markets, you can actually use some of those skills.
Transferable skills.
And, you know, if you take me, I used to work in hotel business. And so if we're thinking of insuring anything in hotels, instead of having to go and, you know, hire the services of a consultant, well, I have a network and I've been in it for a long time. But if we do not have the full set of all skills of our employees, you just don't know, you know. So you need to have a profile, a bit like an internal LinkedIn, where you can then give people a second, a third, and a fourth chance based on everything they are and everything they know, and not just their current role.
That's really interesting, especially we go back to that point about people who are at the start of the business's journey. And as the company develops, are we profiling them enough to know, okay, they can really get involved in that actually? Because they're not going to have as many hats, like you say, as the business grows, but they've got skills that you can certainly use in other areas as the business grows. It's a really interesting point, actually.
And you give them internal career opportunities. We've done that 3 or 4 times. I mean, we're still small. We're only 100 people big, but there's already been a few cases of people who, as we have seen them work, we've realized you're doing a really good job, but you'd be amazing in this other place. And So there was one team member, she was in product management, and she just turned out to be our head of project management, and she's setting up all the processes and all the standards, and she's training everybody, and she's just amazing at what she does, and it's not what she initially came in with. So you really need to know people well so that you can use your workforce flexibly, and it saves you a lot of money by not having to, maybe make people redundant and bring one in.
Particularly when there's so many economic changes, right? And your business needs to change with the times. Really getting that full picture of an employee, maybe not even where they're not just where the current skill sets lies, but where they want to develop skill sets as well. Because I think, particularly if people have a passion, they're going to be more, they're going to be quicker to develop in that space than maybe hiring somebody to do it. But
I mean, on your director of people hat on, I think, have you had to work with line managers quite a lot to identify these soft skills? Because the business gets bigger, you can't be the one identifying all these soft skills in everyone. So if you had to work with hiring managers and upskilling them to notice soft skills in people that you could transfer into other areas and things like that as well?
Absolutely, yeah. So before, when the hiring managers or the line managers come to us and say, we need a team member, we tend to sit down with them and look at the full picture of the whole team. And I even go back another step, and I said, okay, well, but what are you even achieving this year? What are you working towards? And why are you looking for this and that role? And what does this and that role have to deliver? And do you not already have? I try to challenge them so that you can complete the team and say, well, don't you have this skill already? Don't you need a balance? Don't you need somebody who strikes up a bit controversial discussions, that a bit more diverse input,
diversity of thought, right?
Absolutely. So yes, we definitely do that. I try to we have a process where any hiring decision starts at workforce planning. And workforce planning always goes back to, how is our team contributing to the overall strategy? I mean, actually, any team effort aligning to the overall company strategy is not difficult in a company that only has 3 levels. So any team basically delivers directly into top. And so, we go all the way back and say, okay, what are you doing, and how is this helping what we want to achieve this year, next year, in the next 3 years? And then what do you need for that? And how do you think this is going to play out in 2 years or in 3 years? How is this going to evolve? It's actually always very interesting, especially as we talk about our engineering teams, our product teams.
Yeah, that's it. Because you've got like hiring manager needs and business needs that come into it, right? You're looking at what the hiring manager needs in their team per se for a certain task or a certain area of that team. But then you're looking at it from a wider picture to say, okay, but they also need to bring this, and this, because as the business grows, they might need to evolve into this area. So we need to include this in the job description. So it's a paired decision, not just a hiring manager saying, because that's often what happens, I think, in some businesses where the hiring manager has all the power in their decision-making in the hiring, and they hire people that suit them, and then they leave or they change role. And then that's what disrupts business, or that team is so knitted together that they can't integrate with the rest of the business, they can't move, and they start facing these challenges as well.
Absolutely. They tend to build teams. The decision of hiring managers are often very operational and very immediate. And unless you have this conversation about, what are you going to achieve next year and the year after, or what are we all working towards as an organization, and what do we think we can and want to achieve? Unless you have that conversation, there is a big tendency to solving just today.
One thing I think I would definitely recommend anyone looking, or anyone going through any scaling challenges, and I don't know if you've experienced this, Maria, but maybe it was more me than anyone else in the business, but I had a tendency to knee-jerk into, make quick changes, or, this sounds like a good idea, and then 30 seconds later we bought a new piece of tech, signed up for 4 years.
That sounds like a CEO to me. If I've ever heard one.
Around Harry, we would say, let's see if he brings it up a second time.
It's like buying something in a shop, you walk away and say, let's still think about it tonight.
I remember reading an engagement survey once, and someone had written, maybe we should just make a just wait when we decide that we need something in the business. We wait to see if it actually is needed, rather than just doing it and implementing it and changing it again. I was sitting there thinking, that is all me. It's all me.
I have in the past, in one of my past jobs, I had to enable an agile transformation in another tech company, and I was with my team. I was completely submerged in this fundamental agile mindset of doing everything around your customer, everything around your customer need. And so I think to this day there is nothing that I do that is not first surveyed or asked, and tested, and saying, well, are you sure you need it, and why do you need it, and can't we solve it in a cheaper or in a different way, and is this short term or is it long term?
Do we have the resources now?
Yeah.
Because I won't mention the specific piece of tech. Bill probably knows what I'm talking about. But we had a pretty good solution.
But you wanted it.
But I just saw something shiny. I thought that looks pretty good. We used it for 3 months.
And there goes.
Yeah.
There's an SDR book out there, I'm sure. It just says, call this guy.
Yeah.
Sal, call this guy.
Call Harry.
But we're joking, but it is actually absolutely true, because I arrived in this company at a time when everybody could more or less order whatever they wanted, and it was okay because the group was so small that it was easier to control, it was easier to oversee. And it was normal to just send a mail to office management and with a link and say, please order this. And there was no approval process, and there was no questions asked, basically. And now there has to be one, because otherwise,
What was it like in the first months where you obviously joined, like you said, at 50 people, which is such a crucial time in transition from being everyone does a bit of everything, startup-y, to putting process in place, and you obviously came in and had to say, do we need that? Do we need that? Why do you do it like that? And stuff to challenge. What were those early months like when you had to start challenging some of the old ways of doing things?
Maria was the most liked person.
Did you get a Christmas card from anyone?
I was the favorite person for everybody.
Well, that's the point. I've never got a Christmas card from
by the
anyone.
way.
Yeah. What?
I was torn, because I came into an organization where that felt like a big family, where everything was possible, and I wanted to be part of that too. I wanted to also just be able to send things and order stuff, and be happy, and just buy nice things because the office looks nice, and tasty things because they're tasty and make people happy.
The office looks great. Who did this?
Oh, a team of people. It was a cross-functional a team, and in good old agile manner, we did a survey. And we asked for all the... Actually, it was a very good time to expand, because it was a time we all came back from the pandemic. People...
Cheap office rates.
Were people coming back into the office? Were they not? Did they prefer work from home? And so we said, what keeps you from coming to the office? Or what would make you come back?
Really interesting point.
I was talking about this in another podcast, because we had a conversation about this, and I remember you saying your expectation was like, oh, you want a pool table and a games room, but no, it was actually way more logical, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Quiet space was a big one that come up, right? Quiet space to be able to work.
And prayer room, There were people who said they needed to pray several times a day, and that's why they stayed home. And since we have the prayer room, they come all the time.
And this was a really interesting one. I think you guys have done amazingly well. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, you've never really set maybe it's changed now, but originally it was never really set about what days or how much you have to come in. But your ethos was build a place that people want to come in.
Yeah.
It was never about you have to come in. You wanted to build a place that people wanted to come in, to build an office culture, which I think a lot of businesses struggle with, how to get people into an office, and they end up just going down the route of you have to come in these days.
But it brings us back to scaling, right? Because I mean, we've worked with you guys, and you've helped us bring amazing people to the organization. And
great plug for the record.
But many of these people we've brought from very far away. We've brought from literally from their hometowns. We've brought them to Berlin, and it's just a hell of a step for many people to take. And we really wanted this to be a place where that would make it easy for them to
develop relationships
away from home, develop relationships, feel comfortable, feel that they've arrived, feel that they have a safe place, to get to know people, and I just think I imagine it to be very difficult. And so that was very important. And obviously, it was actually also a podcast that I wish I remembered the name, but I don't anymore. And that was, the recommendation was really, people will only come to the office if either you force them or they really want to.
Yeah.
It's their preferred place. And so that's what you have to, and then I asked myself, well, what do they want? And I honestly didn't know. And I thought it was going to be all of these fun things. And it ended to being really
Pragmatic?
Well, things that enable good quality work, focus, but also socializing, relaxing. So a good balance, basically.
Yeah. I've never seen, well, you used to have a games room, basically, didn't you? In your old office?
Yeah, but we had like a 21, 22-year-old workforce at that time. Young recruiters, and it's like, well, we'd tell them to come to the office, what makes it fun, and they would all play games every lunch break and stuff. But we're talking very old school now, when you had set lunch break between 12 and 1 o'clock. If you were on the phone at 12:05, tough luck.
Well, but if you all want to play together, you had to take your lunch break at the same time.
When we started, it was 10 o'clock, 15-minute fag break.
Yeah, I remember
12 o'clock, 1 hour lunch break. 4 o'clock, 15-minute coffee break. It was
the phone would ring at like 11:55, and you didn't answer that phone. If you answered that phone and you're stuck on a call, you're missing your lunch break.
Yeah, there's no like...
Sounds surreal.
There's no like, I was on the phone until 12:30. All right.
Yeah.
Lunch finishes at 1, so
don't eat.
But that's an interesting conversation too, because we very often get the question, what are our working hours if we come to the office or if we don't working hours. And we always talk about, working hours based on trust, which means, of course, you sort of have very loosely, you say, okay, work sort of starts around 9, it sort of ends around 6 p.m. and you have around 1 hour lunch break. But most of our employees are anything between 30 and 40, I'd say, or 20 something, and the majority of them. And so there's many people who have hobbies and many people who have very small children. And so some just, have to bring their kids to school first. And so they show up later, and others have to pick them up. And so they leave a little bit earlier, and then they work a little bit later. And so I find that works really, really well.
Yeah.
But then again, of course, if you can't have it both ways, then you have some people who say, well, but why do I get a mail after 6, or why do I get a mail on Friday at 8? And say, well, honey, you can't have it both ways. You can't demand and then not give. So it's either one or it's the other. And we can go back to what you just said. Everybody's sitting at 9 o'clock, 15 minutes, 1 hour, 15 minutes, everybody. Do you prefer that?
No. Yeah. But you're right. That's where you have to be direct with it as well, right? We sometimes flexibility, often companies pander and be like, oh, no, it's fine. You can, and don't be direct. So, but if you want the flexibility, it works both ways. Right?
Yeah.
And I think you have to be direct with that sort of stuff.
I've heard the term impact over hours.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
100%.
Because the reality is you could be sat at a desk 9 till 5 and do
nothing.
Fuck all. Are we allowed to swear on this podcast? Yeah, fuck all.
Allowed to swear.
Sorry, listeners. Have I sworn yet?
Every episode.
Sorry for all my young listeners. So impact over hours, I think, you could have someone sat there doing nothing for 8 hours a day.
Absolutely.
They're technically doing their hours, or you could have someone that's maybe taking a bigger advantage of those flexible working hours, but actually achieving a hell of a lot. Yeah. So, but it's a fine balance. And it also depends on your role. I don't know, I've heard differing views on this, because some roles, engineering, for example, you can be very isolated. You're working on specific piece of code, and you could go and do that, fix the problem, deploy, etc. Or you could be, in our sense, your role is client facing. So you may be getting a lot done, but if you're not available at certain times, that you have to be there.
Yeah.
We just had a little walk around the office, didn't we? We're recording this at 5 p.m.
In Berlin.
People in meeting rooms having big collaborative meetings.
Yes.
And you can see someone on the whiteboard and me walking around. I'm like, it's amazing. You're not going to have that at home. And you can almost like collaborating and engaging with each other and innovating with each other. And you just don't get that.
It's very difficult.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Look, one of the things that people said in that survey also is that they stay home because they cannot focus because there's so much going on. And it's a lot of fun being here, but if you really want to concentrate, it's very difficult. So we had to set up this silence room that we call the sound of silence, where actually you're not allowed to be disturbed and you're not allowed to be spoken to and you're not allowed to make noise, so that people have one place in the office where, you know,
you could just go. You would get stuff done.
You would be banned.
I would not be allowed in the room.
You would be banned from. Like just imagine Harry in if I'm
calling all my ADHD fellow. Yeah,
that would be torture. If you ever want to torture Harry, stick him in that room for a day. Not allowed to sell.
Well, I'm not really painting the best picture of myself in this podcast.
Yeah,
you're amazing.
It's true. It's the truth. It's the truth. That's the reality.
I remember being every time I'm on a laptop just doing an email and I'll hear Bill, and bang the table. I'm like, clearly I'm doing something.
I told Bill I perfected the art of grabbing attention. Yeah. Be very loud, very aggressive.
So you would be the employee, you would say, don't you want to work from home today?
Why don't you? We're a fully remote company, and yet we've got an office that I work in. Because I just can't work from home. I'm either in the fridge or in the garden or on Netflix. I just can't work.
We make a big effort to get in the office because we're remote, right? And I live in London. I live about an hour and 45 minutes away. 45 minutes to an hour away, not an hour and 45 minutes.
Close, where?
But we'll make a big effort to get in the office together because that's when we get a lot of our collaboration.
Yeah, and I think particularly the last 6 to 12 months have been pretty tough in recruitment.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you're more isolated, when you're in those leadership and sales roles, particularly, the more isolated you are, the more difficult that is mentally.
Yes.
So the more you can get together, the more you can, give each other the boost, that mental boost that you sometimes needed. No matter what role you're in, everyone needs it.
Yeah.
Back to the original topic, what we spoke about was onboarding people and maintaining a culture. If they can come into the office and see what it's like to work here and see the attitude that people apply and see how passionate they are about collaborating, it's very difficult, I find, to do that in a remote organization if it's fully remote, to get them to get into that culture.
And without a doubt, it is the one thing that everybody repeats when we ask them what made you take a decision to actually sign with us and what were you looking forward to. It was always, you seem to have such a cool ambience in the office and so much going on and we love the vibe. And so it makes people sign. So then you have to maintain it. You have to keep it up and people have to. So in this office, Mondays and Tuesdays, the whole leadership is here and us head of sales is here. So we hardly have enough places for everybody to sit down actually. And then as the week progresses, the number of people decreases.
I think that would make sense. I think we'd probably get people less on a Monday. I think Tuesday, Wednesday would be busy. Thursday would probably be busy because it's mostly when people go out to drink on a Thursday. Yeah.
We have a pre-lunch on Thursday.
I'd say
we don't have enough money for that.
Guys, don't get your hopes up. It's not going to happen.
Sorry, guys.
So we might have between 40 and 50 people Mondays and Tuesdays in the office, and then on Friday, 10.
This is actually a common thing I've seen a few times in a few different places. Is 2 days a week a paid for lunch.
Yeah.
And which is just a very obvious way to encourage people in, isn't it?
There you go.
Yeah. So back to those challenges. So just sort of in summary, ask your employees often how they are.
Yeah.
And tech for that, by the way. Is there any certain platform or anything you use for engagement surveys? Because I think that's interesting for the listeners. But people
platform. Yes, we do. And it took us a lot of time. We actually started off with forms and
Google Forms.
Yeah. We realized that you cannot fully anonymize. The admin can always see the emails, And because we were going to do our diversity and inclusion surveys, and we really wanted to understand better who our workforce is and who our individuals are and what they need and what they long for and what would help them, we needed a platform that was guaranteed that it's going to be anonymous. And so we use Jotform now. Jotform, yeah.
Give that.
It's
Jotform.
Jotform.
Okay.
Yeah, JOT form. And so we do surveys 4 times per year, every 3 months, and
Every quarter.
yeah. And there's a normal satisfaction survey, NPS, and so on. It's about 5 questions, always the same ones. And then there is a deep dive one that is always different. And so once per year it comes to give you time to take action on it. And,
I was just going to say that.
and so the first one was on inclusion and diversity. And the second one is on office satisfaction and you have everything you need to do your work. And then the third one, what was that about? Oh, the third one's actually coming. It's going to be about career development and what people need in order to feel that we're doing our best to help them progress. And the last one is going to be a bit about their business acumen and their ability to understand the strategy and what else they need. And so they are quite in depth. They have between 15 and 20 questions, and that is sufficient for us to take action and then let that action actually have an impact, and then do the same survey again.
And you present back the actions to the company. To say, like, this is what we've changed. Because I think that's what, again, you're doing these forms, but then you make changes, but then you don't really announce that you've made these changes. Some people don't know that they've been made.
We have a monthly all hands. And in that monthly all hands, there is always a people and talent update.
Gotcha.
And so in the last one, for example, I gave an update on how our diversity and inclusion activities are going, what we've done, what impact they had, and so on. So,
It just reminded me of another thing, all hands. So at some point, I think we were very, very good with communicating changes, communicating in all senses. And then as we grew, I think we probably just got tunnel visioned and focused on some other things, and communication lacked. So I actually do an all hands every Monday morning, which is maybe slightly aggressive, but we're changing landscape. But
how long is it?
I'm not. It's only 30 minutes, and I don't give maybe as detailed an update as your monthly.
I think you have like a stand up once a week, right?
We have a daily stand up at 10 o'clock with the full company.
Yeah.
It's one person from each team.
Yeah.
Or whoever wants to listen in.
It's more similar to.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's all about what was interesting yesterday, or what did we achieve, and what's happening today, and do we need help from each other?
So that's basically our weekly. So Monday morning we'll kick off with what we achieved last week, what didn't go so well, what we need to work on this week, what we've got coming up, and then we have the dreaded, for me anyway, anonymous questions.
So did you dread them?
Because they can be brutal sometimes.
To hear it.
Yeah. So, but that's been really good, hasn't it? It's actually allowed people.
Funny on a culture point with that though, because I feel like in the UK we make it anonymous because people don't feel like they can say these direct things to leadership. Sometimes in the UK, I think as a culture we're quite apologetic and don't like confrontation. Whereas I feel like when I've stood in on German businesses versions of those, people are happy to ask questions in front of everyone and direct them at the leadership in front of everyone. We kind of anonymise them, but I think
we do anonymise it, but people have the option to put their name on if they want.
No one does.
But I think what I've found anyway is that over the course of doing those, people are more confident to have that conversation with you anyway. So you get a lot of people just having much more open and honest conversations with you, because they can see your reaction to the anonymous questions, whether they're fun or whether they're difficult. And you're just getting on an honest reaction, so that they're not scared of potentially asking you a tough question straight away into your face. So I think that has been, maintaining a level of communication has been a challenge that I think we experienced during our sort of growth phase, and bringing that back into the fold has certainly helped.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because when I arrived a year ago, the survey was not anonymous, and actually it was even read out by the CEO. The results were read out by the CEO, and it said, and Rosie said so-and-so, and Bill said so-and-so. And they were very positive, obviously. Always.
I love it.
And the criticism was never about anybody in particular. Now I'm joking, but obviously that is the case. And it took us a bit of time to get our heads wrapped around the fact that we needed to be courageous enough to make them anonymous and give people a chance, because what you say about the cultures might be true, but in my experience, it's all about creating an environment of safety.
For sure.
And all leaders always think that they're creating an environment of safety, and everybody can come to me, and my people trust me so much. But I mean, we remember when we were in their position, and it is not the reality. There's always a conflict of interest, and there's always a bit of fear of, what is this going to do with me if Harry knows that I criticize something? And so we then did it, and we anonymized the question, and we did get much more information. And it is sometimes a bit discouraging to realize that you get more information when people don't have to put their names down than when you ask them. But it's important.
It's important.
To me, I read a thing that said, but it's not so much that it's the leadership they're hiding their questions from, but it's actually a lot of the time their peers.
Oh, yeah.
They don't want to be judged for the question they're asking in front of their peers a lot of the time. And and I never realized that. I always thought that maybe they just didn't feel comfortable asking leadership and how it might be perceived in their career development if they ask that question. But it's their peers as well.
One more thing, and by no means we've got it fixed and perfect, but if you're going to go down that route of asking people anonymously what their thoughts are, don't take it so personally. Because I think
personally not.
I think
Who said this?
I will figure it out. You can track back all of their other answers. I can know who this person is.
Okay, so it's an engineer.
Yeah. Between the ages of.
Yeah, that's true. We've been guilty of that sometimes.
But it doesn't matter, because the reality is that's how someone feels, and whether it's right, wrong, or that's how they feel.
That's how they feel, and it's important to know.
Yeah.
And you can only do something about it if you actually ask and if you actually hear it. So I think it's enormously valuable, and as long as people ask, give you feedback anonymously rather than tell you when you ask them, there is work to be done.
Yeah. I think when we were particularly maybe 25, 30 people, one of the things that I struggled with was all of the negative feedback, trying to do something with everything.
Oh, yeah.
Rather than seeing that this was just a negative response out of a whole ocean of positivity, and actually nothing's probably needed. This was an outlier, this was an anomaly, rather than being like, we're putting a 6-month initiative around this very, remote response. So I think that's maybe another thing that's worth noting.
And that is something also that you learn, I think, from a startup to scaling, because in a startup, whoever said something or complained about something or had a suggestion, you could just jump on it and do it.
Yeah.
Whereas now, the other day, somebody suggested to buy air purifiers for some of the meeting rooms. And
what?
Air purifier, so something that makes...
increase the quality of air?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And whilst that might be useful for that person who suggested it, when I did the office survey and I asked, what else would you need? Nobody ever said anything about an air purifier. They talked about insulating the rooms better because the sound carries, or they talked about...
Did anyone talk about aircon?
No.
Because
not in Berlin.
It gets quite sticky.
In our Spanish office, we'll do that.
Okay, fair. But you can know it's 25 degrees in Berlin and we're all sweating a little.
And so that gives you perspective, and it tells you, okay, well, yes, this person passionately wants the air purifier, but there is many more people who actually need something else.
And you have to look at your budget. You have to understand that you have to pick a few initiatives that are going to have a bigger impact across the business, right? Yeah. I think that was certainly something that we maybe fell foul of. Yeah. So as a closing tradition, Maria,
Yes.
we ask the person that was last on the podcast to write a question for the person that's next on the podcast. They don't know who's next because often we don't. But
I know who Manjuri is.
yes, you do know Manjuri. Yeah. And she asks, given the current economic scenario and climate, what value does a talent leader bring into the business? It's a difficult one, isn't it? I think, just to give some context, we were talking to Manjuri. A lot of the podcast was about personal brand and how talent, building her personal brand has enabled her to have a seat at the table, if you like.
Yeah.
From a talent perspective. But when you are in the world of recruitment, maybe more so recruitment, and you're not, and in the current economic climate, we're not many people are recruiting as aggressively. What other value can a talent leader really bring to the table?
I wouldn't know where to start. I am so thankful that we have a talent leader. And I mean, additionally to recruiting, which is really important, I think that what I would expect from a talent leader, I'd say, is to understand, how could I say this? Understand the soul of the organization, because it's an ever changing world out there.
For sure.
We talked about it. We talked about the market, and we talked about the technology, and we talked about the products, and we talked about the economy, and we all know that whatever is we have on paper now is, I'm not going to say invalid in 6 months, but definitely invalid in 1 year.
Yeah, for sure.
But we're only going to be competitive if we have an identity as an organization, if we stand for something.
Yeah.
And that is difficult because we're building it. We're growing, right? We what are we, teenagers maybe with 100 people?
Yeah.
Not even.
Yeah.
And so you have to stand for something, and that is difficult because it changes all the time.
Particularly under 100.
Exactly. And so how do you position the organization when you go out there and you talk to candidates, you talk to partners, you talk to, whole networks? What do you say about the organization? How do you sell yourself? Because it can't just be a technology, or it can't just be a product, because that will always change.
For sure.
If I pitched the digital journey we set out to offer, it would probably sound fairly old-fashioned now.
Yeah.
Because the possibilities
there
are just so much. So what is it? Who is Alteos, and what does it really stand for? And why is it interesting, attractive, trustworthy, exciting? Why does it have huge potential? And I think that if a talent leader cannot grasp that, they can't pitch it and they can't represent the organization. I mean, a talent leader is a bit like an ambassador of you.
Absolutely.
Great way to put it.
Yeah, we use the same terminology, and I think a lot of what you're referring to there is a huge understanding of the employer brand, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting, if you're in an organization as a talent leader that isn't doing a lot of recruitment right now, what are you doing to really position your brand in the marketplace in order to benefit when you are recruiting?
Exactly.
Your brand is out there, and you're and I think that's something that you could do
Window.
All day and every day, not just from a recruitment perspective. What else, Bill? What else could a talent leader be looking at, or what value can a talent leader bring?
Well, I mean, everything that Maria said, but and also adding back to,
You can't just say that.
well, whatever Maria said.
Whatever Maria said, so that was it.
It sounded to me.
Maria's always right. But also, I think that planning piece I mentioned earlier, I think internal SWOT analysis on current needs and what could go wrong in the future in teams as well. What have we currently got? What could we do different if we are going to start hiring again? What
Optimize process.
Yeah, I think really trying to fine tune things, because even though you might not be hiring now, you will be hiring. So
That's interesting. Maybe running similarly to what Maria's suggesting around the forms, like understanding people's journey from onboarding,
training, hiring managers,
to onboarding, training, hiring
every
managers.
single company I speak to always tells me that their hiring managers don't give enough feedback on the interview process, or the hiring managers don't write enough on the forms, and things like that. They all can do with upskilling. If you're really setting out what soft skills are needed from a person and they're not interviewing based on those skills, that's a perfect time to train people internally as well.
And we're picking that up in autumn now. We're actually going to do a monthly recruiting training to get the quality of the questions up there.
And it's great career development for these people as well, hiring managers, to be able to say they've been trained in these areas.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I would just simply say whatever Bill said and whatever Maria said. So that would be my personal answer to that question. Maria, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure as always. So much. And that's a wrap.
I think internally, I mean, you need a certain level of transparency, obviously. I think that changes a little bit based on whatever your hierarchy is. So how transparent can you be about everything?
Absolutely.
And does everybody need to know everything all the time? Probably not.
Definitely not, I'd say.
Yeah.